Rector, ladies and gentlemen, today I am privileged to give an overview of my doctoral dissertation, Divine Adoption in the Confessions of the Reformation Period. Initially, I will start with an explanation of how I discovered this theme. 7 years ago, a friend of mine, Reverend Sano, shared with me an interesting article titled The Theological History of Adoption, written by Tim Trumper. It was so interesting that I also read his other 8 articles focusing on adoption. Through those articles, Trumper claims that adoption has been neglected as a whole throughout church history. As a whole, I agree with this claim, but when noting a short remark of Trumper, I questioned his treatment of the confessions. In treating the confessional history, Trumper states, quote, adoption has rarely been accorded official creedal recognition, quote ends. He also writes that is because we have a, quote, another one, small number of confessions that allot adoption a distinct chapter or section, quote ends. When reading this, I immediately thought, oh, something is wrong here. How did I come to think that way? One of my favorite confessions, namely the Heidelberg Catechism, helped me to question Trumper's judgment. The relational tone maintained in the Catechism helped me realize that something was wrong in his judgment. Then this initial thought developed to the main research question, namely, what is the place and function of the concept of adoption in the Protestant confessions in the 16th and 17th centuries? This was how I started exploring 18 important confessions from the Reformation period. After investigating those documents, I came to the following conclusion. Regarding the historical place, adoption already became a part of the Reformed tradition, even prior to the Westminster Confession. In regard to the function, adoption is a teleological grace in the confessions. More precisely, what does adoption as a teleological grace mean theologically? I would like to relate the following 3 points. First, the concept of adoption helps us have a clear focus in the context of the salvation history. As I point out in my dissertation, adoption has the potential of presenting a redemptive historical framework in the confessions, since this framework is so broad, covering predestination through the consummation. Someone may be afraid that it is easy for us to lose focus in this framework. But here is the point. On the basis of my research, adoption not only shows a broad framework, but also helps us have a clear focus because adoption provides direction to the salvation history. Adoption helps us see for where the salvation history is heading. This direction, which is redemptive historical, consists of two aspects. First aspect is the direction of recovering the concept of sonship which was lost in the fall of Adam. The salvation history is moving toward recovering the lost sonship of God among Christians. This first aspect is inseparably related to the second, which is the direction of completing the sonship, conforming it to the image of Christ. Thus, we clearly see through adoption that God has a clear focus in leading the salvation history toward its conclusion. Second, the concept of adoption helps us see the three persons of the Trinity are at work in unity throughout the salvation history. Also, it is this Trinitarian orientation which makes the salvation history familial or relational. More precisely, as the Bible says, it is God the Father who predestined us for adoption to sonship through Christ the Son. Then after delivering us from the slavery to sin, the Father brings us into his family, nurturing and protecting us through his fatherly care. Christ the Son is also simultaneously at work, letting us participate in his sonship and sharing his inheritance with us. The spirit of adoption, uniting us to Christ, leads us to pray to our Father, helping and guiding us on the journey to the kingdom. Thus, on the way of recovering and completing our sonship, it is the household of God where we grow and mature as his children, enjoying the Trinitarian fellowship. Third, the concept of adoption has a practical implication in the confessions. This is because confessions are documents of what the church believes and confesses. Throughout these confessions, what I found is that the familial aspect rooted in adoption is maintained as a part of the Reformed tradition, especially during the Reformation period. What does this mean practically? In that era, the familial aspect was practically useful for building up the church. In other words, in the actual church context, adoption as a teleological grace helps Christians be united as God's children in the triune fellowship, moving toward the completion of the sonship. Why is the concept of adoption so useful in the church context? Needless to say, the essence of the church is inherently familial, since the church is God's household where we are nurtured by the Father, united to Christ, and led by the Spirit. In this sense, the familial aspect of the gospel is not new, but essential in the context of the church. This is the overview of the dissertation. Thank you very much for listening.